Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation about Kustomize. We'll talk a lot about YAML, Kubernetes of course, but like you already seen outside, there is some pastry and there is a lot of pastry in this presentation, so I think you'll enjoy that. So first, in the Kubernetes world, like in pastry, the first thing you will try to achieve is something like the 101 of the cake, so the yogurt cake, and you achieve that in Kubernetes with kubectl. Kubectl run backend. Here I define the image I want and I deploy it. Behind the scene, it's just a call made from your CLI to the API server. At the end, the API server will try to reconcile everything with the controller, so deployments will create replica set will create pods. It's just the bare system inside Kubernetes, and at the end, you'll have your deployment. But it's not like that in production. You don't want to kubectl run everything, because it's just the simplest way, but not the production way. And you have more than one deployment in production. You have deployment, of course, stateful set maybe, services for DNS resolution, config map, secrets, ingresses. Yeah, there is a lot of things to manage when you want to deploy things like that. And in Kubernetes, you need to manage all of them inside the same place. Usually, I call that the GitOps way. You store everything in Git, and you choose to deploy like you want. One solution can be a push solution, where you commit in Git and push from your CI, GitLab, TeamCity, whatever solution you are using kubectl apply like that, and then it's deployed. But you can do the other way. Pull stuff from the cluster using Argo or Flux. Both are really good. I really love Flux. And here you can define what you want. And your cluster will fetch data from your Git repository automatically and apply that in your cluster. So at the end, it's one way to deploy things, and it's more secure because you don't have to expose your API server to the world. But your application, there is a lot of things you want to achieve with this application. There is not one application. Sometimes you want to modify part of the application related to your organization. For example, here, you can add some specific annotations for your specific need. Here, for Alert Manager, for example, to get some information about who is in charge of this application. Or you want to change the registry. It's not something you want to achieve everywhere, but sometimes it's required. Some configuration, of course, you want something different. Some resources. I don't want to run the same thing locally and in the cluster. There is sometimes some one-shot modification you want to do. Rolling update, I want to change it because locally I don't want any rolling update. I just want to crash everything and start from zero. So it's something you can remove. The health check for investigation, you can remove the health check just to get into the pod to get information from a not running one, because the readiness or liveness prevent the investigation. And there is some part of it related to the environment where you deliver your application. Especially if you deliver on the cloud, you maybe want to modify your application for this specific environment, which is not the same as local or other environment. So logging, service account, maybe you want some specific service account, or even some affinity. On your laptop, you have a graphic card, so all nodes will have access to this graphic card, but in the cloud, it's maybe not the case. So there is a lot of tool to achieve this kind of modification. But yeah, it's a nightmare. It was a nightmare before. The first solution was to publish something in one place, so all manifests, and fork this and get the modification in this fork repository. Okay, this is a solution, but like any fork, you have to do the rebase stuff after. So if you add multiple annotation, change the manifest, the reconciliation is hard to do. Another solution can be done using Git submodule, for example, is just forking-ish, but doing the modification from this base using some tooling. YQ, the YAML version of GQ, for example, can help you on that, but still, you need to have access to the original one and do some modification, which is only YAML modification, not Kubernetes modification. So it's something good. It's a great idea, but not something really powerful. And then another solution, it's what I call the parameterization L, trying to make everything behind the parameter to make the worst thing possible. And for me, it's Helm. Helm, behind that, you have, if we take the Nginx chart, we see it's really hard to leverage all the data from this. And Helm, the main idea at the beginning was to provide a DSL over a chart to make your product simple enough to be installed in a cluster. But here we have a lot of information related to Kubernetes and not only to the chart itself. So it's hard to manage both at the same time, and it's very, very imperative. So if else everywhere, hard to read and manage. So yeah, for me, it's not the right solution. And in this context, because we are talking only about YAML, there is so many solutions out there. Some are just do the generation from the manifest, from your code itself, through annotation in the Java part to generate your code. There is some tooling in JavaScript or any language possible. I've found more than 100 tools for this use case. But here we are now here to talk about Kustomize. And Kustomize is the main solution provided by people doing Kubernetes. So the same mindset used for Kubernetes development has been used for Kustomize. The way to use Kustomize is declarative by definition. There is no templating system in here. It's just bare YAML all over the place, and you just declare what you want, and it's not something with if and else everywhere. So first, we'll try to see how an application can be deployed and used using Kustomize. First, my application. It's a simple one, a backend, a database, a front end, and a file system. So it can be Minayo, for example. So just 4 parts of my application. So first, it's not something related to Kustomize, but you see we used a pattern where every part of the application, it's not the real technical level of Kubernetes. It's not all the deployment altogether, all this config map in the same file. It's backend database. So if I want to remove the file system, I just remove one file. It's simpler than the other way. And now I have all the ingredients. I will implement the recipe. The recipe is the customization file. Sorry. This file, first, you see, it's a Kubernetes file. So you won't apply this file to the cluster, so there is no resource in the cluster for it, but you have some API version and kind. It's very useful because if we plan to migrate from one version to another, you have all the things available for that because you have the information of the version, which is something working very well in Kubernetes itself. And then we have this resources directive. Here, you see the backend.yaml it's in fact a list of relative passes to the file next to the customization YAML. So if you choose to add an extra folder here, you'll have to modify this list to add this extra folder. Everything in Kustomize is relative by default. It's something, we are not used to it. Usually we do imports and the system is able to resolve everything for us. Here, it's relative, we have to keep that in mind. And with that, and with this customization file, we just put it in the Blender and then run. Our Blender is kubectl here. kubectl apply -k. It's not -f. K for customize, of course. And then the result will be published to the cluster. If you want, Kustomize is built in kubectl, but you can use the release version from Kustomize itself to do the Kustomize build. Kustomize by itself can't deploy anything to a cluster. It will just do the modification and the YAML part, and you can pipe it to the apply command in kubectl. Why do we have 2 different ways to do that? Because in Kustomize, you have access to the full feature set of Kustomize, but not all are published into kubectl. So you have advanced features available in Kustomize and not yet released in kubectl. But Kustomize is not just something to pack every YAML. We can do the same thing with cat by definition. So we will see there is more than just this part. So first, this customization file is the main point of modification for everything. So we'll add some information here to improve our system. First, the config map and secrets. Instead of writing what you see on the left part, writing this kind of thing, so config map with the data and more the secret with the base 64 encoded values, which is a nightmare to manage. You don't want to manage that. And by definition, Kustomize can do that for you. So what you see on the left can be translated in the definition on the right, and it's simpler to write this instead of using a standard way of Kubernetes manifesting. So yes, it's one way. It's not mandatory, but it's simpler to use that. And Kustomize provides you a lot of features to load data, and it's not simply written in the customization file. Here, I've seen a lot of people using config map to load the nginx conf for server, for example, and you don't want to manage this file embedded in a config map. You want a bare simple file in your file system. Your editor is available to help you for the auto-completion, coloration, and everything. Using it embedded in a config map, it's a nightmare by definition. So here, you're able to load everything, and if there is some secret base 64 encoding to do, it's the job of Kustomize and not yours, so it's way better. And cherry on the cake for that, this set of managers, so config map generator and secret generator, will provide an extra suffix at the end of the name of this secret or config map. This suffix is in fact the digest of the values set inside the config map or secret. It means if you deploy something different than the previous deployment, for example, I've changed a config path or just changed one byte, the name will be different. If the name is different, on the right you see we have the deployment. The name in the deployment will be different too. And then the deployment will restart because it's a new config map, so the system has to restart the deployment by definition. So doing that with Helm is a bit hard. You need to do some hash thing manually, add some annotation just for that. Here it's not annotation. And if you want to achieve that without Helm, you need to install something in your cluster for that. So here it's built in. And again, it's better because it's made with the immutable way of things in Kubernetes. So config map and secrets can be immutable. And without that, you won't be able to publish an immutable secret. So it's really cool. But it's not the only feature we have in Kustomize. In fact, everything you should do in many files can be located through directive inside the customization file. So the namespace, for example, this is not something I want to paste everywhere in my manifest list. So I can just set it in the customization file, and then it will be applied automatically by Kustomize. So very simple. Again, prefix, suffix, if you want to add that, it's really useful. This example is very silly, just to add two prefix and suffix. But in the end, it's really useful if you do some canary testing or traffic splitting with a service mesh like Istio. You can deploy the same thing multiple times in the same cluster and just to do the routing stuff for you. So yeah, it's very useful to have this kind of feature. You don't have to publish twice something. Images. I don't want to scroll down inside every manifest. I have to get the image list for everything. Here, I'm able to list all images from my manifest and say, okay, I want to change the registry name or the version or set a specific digest. And everything is located here. So if I want to do some audit, it's just here, and it's way simpler. And after that, you have access to this in the manifest, in the deploy, following the specification. And you see there is no templating stuff. It's just bare configuration. Again, replica, it's a simple directive here. I don't use it a lot because I use horizontal pod autoscaler for that. But in the end, it's one way to set every component in Kubernetes compatible and scalable by definition. can be modified using that. So at the end, stateful set deployment will be changed just because I've set this directive before in the customization file. And one really neat feature, if you want to migrate from Helm to Kustomize, so first stop, don't migrate things, it's hard. It's already done with Helm, just keep it like that. But you can use Helm from Kustomize using this Helm charts directive. You have to provide the values YAML and all the extra information required to Helm template this, and then this file, the result of the Helm template, will be used by Kustomize like if it was another file in this list. So you can use all the directive we just saw and use that from the chart you already have access to. But from now, I just presented parts of things to make your life simpler in Kustomize, but not to deploy multiple things in parallel or to address the flavor of your application, because we have many environments. I have integration, pre-production, production, demo 1, demo 2, demo 3. We all have that, and every time we need something different. So with Kustomize, we have that in mind. So we can create, in this example, I have my repository. I have a new folder called base. So it's not mandatory. It's best practices here, but you can change and do whatever you want. It's not hard-coded and it's not mandatory in this system. So I've created the base, which is the common things for everything in your deployment. So every time you will deploy something, it will be stored in the base. And then, so if we take a look at the customization file here, we have the same thing as before, but with some config map generator for the database. I want to provide the value to link the backend and the database all together, just by default. Okay, this is the core component. And the other part, it's the overlays. Again, it's a keyword, but you can change it if you want. You can even remove the overlays folder. And for the overlays /dev, I have this customization file, and I just say, okay, I want to import the resources located in the /base. So yeah, everything is relative. And I provide some extra configuration, so credential for the database. Really cool, really simple. And for the prod, it's the same one. I have just the difference between prod and dev are just the credential. It's nothing else than that. And the core part is located in the base. And if it's in the base, we can use, and it's something really annoying with Kustomize, we don't have this kind of thing like an Helm chart registry, but in fact we have it's called Git. I think you all already know Git, and we can store our base on a remote Git repository, and it can be fetched by Kustomize during reconciliation and manifest generation. So here I'm using a specific registry, and I'm using a reference to a tag. So some people, development team, can publish something in a registry, like they can do with Helm. It's just a Git repository. They tag the registry, okay, and as an operation on the operation part, I can consume that and use just this link to fetch the data for this specific one. So it's very simple, and I can split the concern, development on one part and operation on the other one. But until now, I've presented to you a lot of directives to add something in the manifest. But if I want to add something more precise, more subtle than the namespace, for example, here I have one requirement. I want to deploy something in GCP. No, it's the development part. So I want my log format to be text, because it's hard to read the JSON on the console line every time. So I just want to do this modification. And what I want to provide here is deployment named backend. I want to add an environment variable on the container name backend2. And the environment variable is log format set to text. Okay. It's not a valid deployment on the right. It's just the bare minimal information to apply this modification. And in fact, in Kustomize, you can provide this as an overlay. It will be applied above the original definition of the backend part. So I set that with the patch strategic merge, kubectl apply again, -k, and the result is that. So we see here, the log format text is at the right place, and all others are coming from the base, the original one. So I can do whatever I want if I am able to describe the modification I want to apply above something already present. And with the Helm chart thing, you can do that above generated Helm charts. So it's really cool if you don't have the entry point on the Helm charts. And it's the same thing it was for development, the previous one. Here, same thing for production. And what I like a lot here, it's I'm able to name this modification. So here it's HA to provide high availability, but I have some log as JSON. And at the end, you can name your modification, and then it's simpler to reason about it, to get the information of why do we need to apply this one? What is the goal at the end? And like that, patch strategic merge twice with two different files, kubectl apply, and then the resulting file. It's just the original one with two overlays applied above it. But here I've added things, but if I want to replace something, or maybe delete something, so we'll see the replacement. So there is a specification in JSON. It's called the JSON 6902, I think. It's a specification with 3 elements: operation, add, replace, or delete, the pass, so it's a JSON pass, and the value you want to set at this specific pass. Here, it's very useful, and the most of the time I've seen that, it was on ingress, because you can deliver ingress, but ingress, you need to change the host, because the host is different depending on where you deploy your application. And here, I've just set this file, and I will use that in, again, the customization file, no surprise here, and I will define the file and the type. It's not file related here, the type, so it's a network, it has IO, v1, ingress, and the name. And the ingress definition after the kubectl apply will be modified using this JSON specification. And then we see there is the host part here. So as a developer, I can provide to every team consuming my manifest the ingress definition, and I can just do a host empty or just host to be replaced, and people will see the modification has to be done using this method. And we can go deeper in this, because in fact overlays are it's one thing, but overlays can be a base for something else. So it's a multi-level inheritance system in Kustomize. In fact, I've deployed a product in the past in many environments. It was a nightmare to manage before that, and using this solution, it was a bit simpler. I don't say it's simpler, real simpler, but it's better than nothing. So we had this multiple environments, so Google Cloud, Scaleway, on-premise with Red Hat and Rancher. It was something hard to manage because there is different between the APIs of every customers, and we wanted to use specific APIs everywhere. So we used what we call this. This slide is ugly, I know, but it's the simplest solution to introduce this multiple layer thing. So you see that if we just look into the Google Cloud part, we had these overlays named Google Cloud, and inside we have a base. And in this base, we have some overlays with int, prod, and everything in it. If we dig just for that, this intermediate base is very useful, because if you deploy somewhere and you want to add something to everything in this somewhere, you are able to do that by using this intermediate base, which is also an overlay in this context. Here I just set this logging format again, and I've set this customization file, which is located not in the root base, but in this intermediate base. And then the int environment in Google Cloud just consume, again, its relative path, so // base, it's a link to the Google Cloud base, so it's a link to it, and then I'm able to consume something from the base made for me, so made for Google Cloud, and then I'm able to use this specific modification for log format, for example. But it's up to you to define this hierarchy, because maybe in my case, it was better to use this logic. with the cloud provider first and the environment after, but in some time, something else is better, and there is no hard thing on this part. It's up to you to decide. But we all know the inheritance system, it's hard to manage. We can't achieve everything in Java code, it's the same, so there is solution for that. Imagine here we have two environments in the same environment, same deployment system. So the same cloud provider. Here it's on-prem, but we want to enable Open LDAP authentication for both, but not for this one in the middle. If we move this out to the common base, everything will be with OpenLDAP, and I don't want that. So here we have a solution. In Kustomize, it's called component. It's very powerful because you can create one file. Again, it looks like it's named customization.yaml. It looks like it, but it's a kind component. And this file can provide some extra feature, and your users, your customers, will be able to get this extra feature on demand. So here, this feature is just create the Open LDAP thing, so just the simplest manifest possible for Open LDAP, and a patch strategic merge to add some data to the backend, to let the backend know there is something to communicate to the Open LDAP path, for example. Just some configuration. But if you just do that, there is nothing different than before, because component is by definition opt-in. So you have to, as a consumer, you have to select the component. In fact, it's just feature flags, but at the YAML level. And then with this, you're able to get, so yeah, it's a nightmare to deal with ... but the IDE is quite helpful on that. But here, you are able to get this component and enable this Open LDAP thing just for this specific part. And it's stored at the higher level, usually in the base / components. And you can, as a consumer, list every component possible to get some feature for your specific case. So it's very useful. It provides a solution to don't repeat yourself. And last part for this presentation, it's about plugins. Because in the Kustomize and Kubernetes world, everything is written in Go. You can extend the Kustomize API using Go yourself, or like the Helm chart. By the way, everything I've presented to you, every directives are in fact some plugins, but just built-in plugins. And you can do the same thing. The Helm chart, it's a plugin developed by the Kustomize team, and it's doing some shell-out thing using the Helm binary available on your system. And you can do the same. For me, I've done that for subs. I like to store secrets in Git, but I want to do that securely. So using subs, it's a really good project, by the way. And I've created some custom objects on the left here. And using some generators, I'm able to modify this object because my code will receive this object, do the modification, so remove this specific kind, and create the file on the right, the real secret, which will be sent to the cluster. In fact, the left part is never sent to anywhere. It's just locally resolved and managed by your code. And you can do the same, but with more features. In fact, transformers here are just pipe in Linux. You can code something which is just in the middle. It will receive everything from Kustomize and from the manifest part, and you can do whatever you want. So if you want to store some sub-secret, but using the real secret API, you can. You just need to implement the parsing, and like you see on the bottom of the slide, you have the subs parameter. If there is something like subs, you know it's something you want to decode. So it's perfect for that because you can achieve whatever you want. It's just a plugin you have to build. And there is a lot of other things, but during this tool in action in 30 minutes, it's hard to provide everything. So I invite you to read the documentation. There is a lot of blog posts about it, and I really feel you will discover a lot of features which will help you to deploy things in your Kubernetes cluster with Kustomize. I'm Kevin, Google developer expert on Google Cloud and Kotlin, GitLab hero, and also I'm working at Gradle. So if you want to discuss about that, I'm available here. And if you want, follow me on Twitter, and I'll be happy to discuss about that. Thank you. I think we have maybe one question. I don't see any hand. Don't be shy. Or maybe just come right now if you want. No? Just for, I'm working at Gradle, like I've said, and there is some stickers here. And if you want to use Kustomize in production, we are using it a lot, and it's possible to, oh, there is no slide anymore, but you can apply to Gradle, and we'll be really happy to talk about that if you want. Good. Thank you.